Welcome to Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. It's presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. In multiple ways, you can interact with us here on the program. 201-939-4513, hashtag Giants Chat on Twitter. You can also directly send in your questions and comments to us. I'm at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. He is at Giants WFAN. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So the Giants collide with the Saints in the Big Easy on Sunday. We're going to break down the matchup, but let's start, as we always do on a Friday, Paul, with Brian Daboll speaking to the media earlier today. And the two notable injuries to monitor is Evan Neal, who has missed a handful of games in recent history, and then, of course, Darren Waller, whose clock just started coming off of injured reserve. Brian Daboll had mentioned that, in all likelihood, because the injury report is not out, Evan Neal will be listed as doubtful when it's all said and done. So you put two and two together, highly unlikely he's going to be out there. Tyree Phillips will command right tackle, but Waller seems to be a little bit more promising compared to some of the other players we have discussed.
The only thing that Coach Daboll would characterize regarding Waller is that he looked good doing some things yesterday, and that was his first practice. Remember, since he had injured the leg. So I'm very optimistic. He's out there again today. We don't know how limited he may be. I'm going to assume, my best guess, my gut feeling, is he'll be limited again today. He'll do the walkthrough tomorrow. He will probably, gut is going to be questionable. They're going to say he's questionable.
In terms of the listing.
Yes,
okay.
In terms of the official listing. I think he's going to be listed as questionable. I think unless he takes a bad turn, he's playing on Sunday against the Saints. Right. I do believe that. And I think with him in there, even if he only plays, let's say, half the game, let's just say 35 to 40 snaps.
And you would assume he'd be on a pitch count if he plays.
Probably, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to say even if he gets 4 or 5 targets, they could be critical targets.
Yeah.
Darren Waller is a very dangerous weapon for an offense. If nothing else, if he plays 40 snaps, and some of them he'll be blocking on, some of them he won't be blocking on, but they'll be running plays anyway, the fact is you have to account for him.
Sure.
So he is an edge for the Giants as soon as he steps on the field. Combine that with probably additional saps for Dexter Lawrence, who was limited the other day against Green Bay. And I feel good about the Giants' chances going down to New Orleans and pulling off this upset, because I don't think it's that much of an upset. I think the Saints are on that same plane as the Giants and the Packers are, and so many other teams, right in the middle of the quicksand of mediocrity. I do think winning in that building is a nightmare. We know what the Giants' history is there.
Though it hasn't been as tough over the last few years since Drew Brees retired.
Well, 3 times in the last 5 trips down there, the Saints have scored over 40 points against the Giants.
Well, I guess I'm talking about the Saints at home in general, not just against the Giants.
Right.
Let me clarify.
And this is not Sean Payton's Saints anymore.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Big difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
So I'm saying I feel pretty confident that the Giants could pull off this upset. Because I just don't think it's that big of an upset. I just don't.
Well, I think it was last week we were categorizing the remaining opponents not in the division, because the Eagles clearly are one of the top-tier teams. And the way that at least I labeled it is, if you look at the Packers, the Saints, and the Rams, they're not Commanders-Patriots territory. They're the next level up.
They're in the middle of the
common
quicksand.
element.
That's
Correct,
where they are.
with all of these teams. And I would probably say, based on how these teams are performing right now, I'd probably put the Rams ahead of the Pack, just based on overall performance, scoring, and so forth, compared to Green Bay and New Orleans.
By about a forearm as they try to dig out of the quicksand.
Well,
that's
the Rams, I mean, you're talking about a team that put up 31 against the Ravens. New Orleans is averaging under 22 points per game, so that goes back to what you were talking about. This is not the Sean Payton Saints. And the Packers had that surge, that 3-game stretch, but that wasn't necessarily how they were playing throughout the entire season. I will say this, though. New Orleans, if you're looking at the biggest challenge that this team poses, I'm not turning to the offense, I'm turning to the secondary.
Right.
This is not a game where you want to be playing from behind.
Correct.
And you want Tommy DeVito getting up to 35 pass attempts. Okay, I'm not even going to explore 40. He gets into that 35 territory. I don't think that's good because this secondary is arguably one of the best, if not the best, in the NFL right now.
Saints are tied for 26th in rush defense at giving up over 130 yards a game.
They've given up 200-plus yards in 2 of the last 3 games.
That's correct.
Yeah.
They've also given up, and I mentioned this at the end of the show the other day, they've given up the 3rd most quarterback rushing yards in the NFL this year, which means that
Which is not a good thing coming off the game that Tommy had.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah.
Tommy showed last week that he's got legs too, and that he now understands it's okay to run. Avoid the sack at all costs. Run if you have to. And they also ran some design runs for him as well, including the 26-yarder down to the 1-yard line. I think that's got to be a part of it. And I know it's hard for people to hear me say the quarterback needs to run. That goes against my grain so much.
Well, now you're very enthusiastic about it all of a sudden.
But in this case, given where you are, that has to be part of the game plan to beat the Saints because they are weak against the run. And if they want to stack things and jam it up against Barkley, well, the 2 ways you're going to have to try to move the ball and loosen them up is with the quick game in the pass, which I mentioned on Wednesday, and using DeVito in several running combinations. So the Giants have the necessary components to drive down the path to victory against the New Orleans Saints. This is more than anything, it's going to be an execution deal. As you often say, execution is critical. Well, there's no doubt. There are some games and some matchups where no matter how well you execute, you're still going to be in rough territory. You know, against the Eagles, for example. The Eagles roster is so high level. No matter how well the Giants execute, that's still a rough thing to pull off. Okay? That's not the case with the Saints. This is a team that if they execute properly and follow the path to victory, they can win this game.
The talent disparity is not as overwhelming as Dallas, Philly, San Francisco. So the conversation is different from that standpoint. And Tommy was a huge reason why there were no sacks in the last game.
Yes.
Because of his ability to say, okay, hey, if it's going to part like the Red Sea up the gut, I'm going to run and I'm going to try to create something. Can you bring that facet to the table again to keep a Saints pass rush that has not been jumping off the page in check? And I think they're more than capable of doing that. Let's put things in perspective. The most intimidating and productive pass rusher for the Saints this season is Carl Granderson. And Granderson's a nice player. But notice, we're not talking about Cam Jordan this season.
Oh, he's not top level, and Jordan is long in the tooth.
True, but even long in the tooth, Cam was performing at a level where you had to account for him.
Until
he has not been as disruptive this season.
Not much at all.
As in previous years. So they're not suffocating teams up front. But they don't need the pass rush to get home as much because of how good the cover guys are.
Yeah.
Paulson Adebo is playing lights out. He's got 14 passes defense before you even talk about the interceptions.
He's a
the
good
Honey
player.
Badger has also been playing very well.
Also long in the tooth.
What about former Giant Isaac Yiadom? He's having a very good season, too.
He's actually been productive for them. And that's a little bit surprising because he's bounced around to several teams before finding what appears to be a stable home in New Orleans. Really, it's Demario Davis, in my mind,
linebacker, yeah,
who is really the critical component to their defense. Played for the Jets for a number of years. Everybody here in New York knows about him. Went to Cleveland for a season. Now he's been with New Orleans for a handful of years. And what people don't realize, I talked about him on the Dable Show on MSG that aired last night, that premiered. He and myself and Sean O'Hara had him as a critical matchup against JMS, John Michael Schmitz, because the center is primarily responsible for the middle linebacker. Okay? The thing about Davis, in each of the last 4 seasons, he's either been first or second team All-Pro. People just don't think about him in that category. But he's been doing it.
Oh, well, if they haven't, they just have not noticed or taken the time.
He's a 12-year pro
Yeah.
who's got over 1,200 career tackles. That's third among active players in the league. He's got 5.5 sacks this year. And the reason is he's a 3-down linebacker who on first and second down will play standard linebacker positions. On third down, they'll move him up and they'll put him on the line and make him a blitzer. And that versatility within the scheme is part of what makes him such an important player for them.
He's got great instincts. That's, to me, what stands out
and great technique.
about Demario Davis.
And he's just so smart.
Yeah, and still performing at a very high level. No surprise, he leads the team in tackles. He's right behind Carl Granderson, who I brought up in sacks, only one behind him. Tackles for loss, he's up there. He's a disruptive player for somebody that is right in the heart of the defense. And the way teams have tried to limit his damage is by chipping him with the running back. That's what they try to do. He spoke to the media this week. He said Carolina was just bringing the running back his way time and time again. And we're not talking about conventional run plays. It was just they wanted to throw. They'd send the running back his way. And there was one great play Demario made, actually, if you go back and you look at the film from last week, where he thought he was taken out, and he sort of did, one of these acrobatic moves and still was in position to tackle the quarterback. So, once again, another example of how sound a player he is. That's the type of player that when Tommy's at the line of scrimmage, you have to identify where he is and know where he's at and where he's anticipating to go at all times.
Now, one thing to watch for, okay? Alontae Taylor is their nickel corner.
Yep.
All right? The Saints have gotten eaten alive by slot receivers this year. It has been a significant problem for them. Well, did you see what Wan'Dale Robinson did last weekend? He really had a bust-out game. Career-high 114 total yards. His 32-yard run and his 32-yard catch were the two longest plays from scrimmage he's had since he joined the Giants.
Yeah, it was a huge game for him. Really his breakout game this season.
You could make a case, I'm sorry, Tommy, you could make a case that Wan'Dale Robinson should have been the star of the game instead of Tommy DeVito.
He made the play that helped set up the game-winning field goal. Nothing bigger than that.
How about the flea flicker catch?
Sure, where he came back towards the ball. He had a favorable matchup considering they had a linebacker out on him, but still made the play.
It was a sensational play to come back and get an underthrown ball.
Yeah.
And the 32-yard run was nothing to sneeze out of you.
Well, we know he's athletic.
And what about the tiptoe catch on the sideline? He made 4.
And then hustling back to the line of scrimmage, by the way, because he was nervous about whether or not he got both feet in.
Well, and they had to quickly get it off. He was actually in, though.
No, he was, but he said that he wasn't sure. Well, so in the frame of mind, though, in the game, though, to hustle back to make sure that they continue on their offense.
Very, very important plays. Maybe the 4 most important plays of the offense the entire day. I mean, I'll be frank. That's why I ran right after him on the field after the game. He was my first.
And he ran away from you.
No, he did not. Oh, he did? And besides, he couldn't.
Yeah.
He couldn't.
What do you mean he couldn't?
You think I can't catch him?
No, sure, absolutely. What am I saying? I mean, you ran the 40-yard dash.
He's got equipment
10 times better than him.
He's got equipment on. I can catch him.
You got a jacket on. I mean, it's nothing. Yeah.
But
comparison is nothing.
So he was my first MSG interview after the game. How could it not be? He was the star of the game. Anyway.
No, I'm with you, Paul. They don't win that game if Wan'Dale doesn't make his plays. And if you remember this offseason, I was very high on Wan'Dale Robinson. Unfortunately, it took a little time for him to come back from the injury.
This
is
the guy they drafted. Yeah. This is what they plan to do with him.
Well, because we talked about, based on what he did at Nebraska and Kentucky, he was utilized out of the backfield. Mm-hmm. He was utilized as a guy that if you get him out open space, good luck trying to tackle him. Because I know with Kadarius Toney, he was always synonymous with the joystick statement. Well, Wan'Dale's got a little bit of joystick in him. Does he not?
Go back and look at the All-22, folks. I know they call it NFL Plus now. They don't call it Game Pass anymore. If you look at the All-22 on the final catch that he made to set up the game-winning field goal, his juke on the release just loses the defensive back.
Keyshawn Nixon.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Nixon had absolutely no chance.
He was in a very precarious spot, too. I don't know what the Packers were thinking on that play. That's a whole other thing. But, hey, the Giants took advantage of it.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's why you need playmakers. You need game changers, okay? We talk about it. You use your Heddick-esque MO. I will not put you in trouble in terms of the sponsor, but I'll leave it at that.
And I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm looking out for you.
Can I just add one more time? For like the 575th time in the last 5 years.
Or 576, but go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Dan Reeves says, make plays above the X's and the O's. Wan'Dale Robinson did that. So does Isaiah Hodgins on the touchdown catch in the back of the end zone off a scramble drill. Now, it's one thing for Tommy DeVito to avoid trouble and then to make a pinpoint throw. But Hodgins has got to make the play. If Hodgins does not make the play, that's nothing more than an incomplete pass and they're kicking a field goal. And guess what? They probably lose the game.
He made the catch, but he also stayed alert to help his quarterback make a play. Because on plays like that, if your receivers are stagnant and they're just waiting around, Tommy doesn't have an outlet in the corner of the end zone. So that's a big part of it. That's why they practice it. I know it's called the scramble drill, but they practice those scenarios, buying time for the quarterback and giving him another outlet. And that's what was outstanding about Isaiah Hodgins' play. I know we spoke a lot about the defense, and we're in agreement the biggest challenge is the back end, but let's analyze a little bit of this Saints offense, because I know we said in passing, this is not the Sean Payton, Drew Brees days, but there is still talent on this Saints team.
That's Olave right there. Kamara right there.
Yeah, beyond those two, though, what about Rashid Shaheed, who is probably going to return?
Yeah, he's banged up. He's banged up.
But it looks to be somewhat promising for him, and he spoke to the media. So he really tests the depths of the defense. Jimmy Graham had a nice game against Carolina. I know you were talking about Cam Jordan long in the tooth. Well, I think Jimmy Graham applies, but he's been a huge red zone target. The Saints, by the way, and this is the area to watch out for. They've got to get there. New Orleans, 7 of their last 8 red zone possessions, Paul, have resulted in touchdowns. They've actually been very good in the last 2 games in that department.
Yeah.
They're not explosive.
50% on the season, which is only
but I'm looking at
second.
Correct. But recent history, though, it's been a lot different than 50%. They've got speedsters. Taysom Hill is expected to return. He didn't play, and he's that jack of all trades.
Problem.
Well, what happened in the last game in New Orleans? Remember the bumper car?
I don't even want to talk about it.
Well,
I don't even want to talk about it.
We can't relate to the previous
here's
contest.
what you need to know about Taysom Hill.
Yes.
Number one.
See, I finally got you to talk about it. Okay.
Number one.
Mission accomplished, yes.
He has caught over 20 passes this year for over a career-high 200 and something yards. Okay? He's been used more as a receiver this season than any other time in his career. So that you need to keep in mind. The other thing you have to have at the very forefront of your perception is that he is the up back on the punt team. That's very dangerous because he could do anything from there. He could throw it. He could run it. I mean, you got to be really, really careful with him being the up back on special teams. But the thing I just want to throw back to Jimmy Graham for a minute, because this guy's like older than Methuselah. He's only caught 4 balls this year. 3 of them went for touchdowns.
Well, that's what I'm saying. In the red zone, he's a favorite target of Derek Carr.
But he's only caught 4 passes all season. Coming back from the dead in his second tenure with the Saints. I mean, I want to say this guy's been playing since the goalposts were up on the goal line. I mean, that's how...
He hasn't been around as long as you, Paul.
It just seems like it. It just seems like it,
Well, he's been in the league since 2010, so he's over a decade. There's no doubt about it. And towards the latter part of his career...
1910?
No, I just checked on the computer. I promise you. Yes, they don't have to dust him off. But you're right. Limited opportunities. 5 targets, 4 catches, 3 touchdowns. That's nuts of a stat line.
It's insane.
Yeah. But he's only played in 9 games, too. So, he hasn't been fully healthy and active for the entire season. And it's also surprising because they've got Juwan Johnson on the roster, who was a significant red zone target last season.
Yes.
He's dealt with some injuries, but Jimmy Graham has been somebody that has been targeted a little bit more down inside the 20. So you have to account for him. Michael Thomas is back on injured reserve, so the Giants don't have to worry about him. And then there's Derek Carr, who was expected to come in and do a lot of damage, and that hasn't happened. I mean, you look at his numbers, extremely modest, pedestrian, 13 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. But in fairness,
he's
Paul,
been banged up.
That's what I was going to get to. You're talking about head injury, you're talking about ribs, you're talking about shoulder, and he's not near even maybe 85% health. He's even admitted that when he spoke with the media. He's playing through it. He's gutting it out. Not saying that the Giants should get cheap shots in, but this is a game where if you can get some hits on Derek Carr, that could very well wear him down. And once again, I'm never calling for a player to get hurt, but he also has been taken out of 3 games this season that he hasn't been able to finish.
He's had mileage on his tires too.
Yeah.
Which is also part of it. No matter what we say the fact remains, durability becomes more and more of an issue as you take more and more hits over the years in this league.
Without a doubt. Yeah. And Carr, you want me to look up? I don't think he was in the league in 1910, but
he was not.
I'll make you feel comfortable. He came in 2014, okay? So he's not as old as Jimmy Graham, just to put things in perspective.
Okay.
Okay, we'll use Jimmy Graham. He'll be the new rule on this show. If you want to talk about how old and worn down a player is, you say he's played X amount of years in comparison to Jimmy Graham.
Okay.
How about that? Do you like that?
That's
Can
fine.
you adopt that?
That's
okay.
fine.
We're on the same page.
We haven't even
from that
talked about
standpoint.
Alvin Kamara.
Yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing about Kamara. Kamara, remember, missed the first 3 games due to suspension.
Yes.
So he hasn't been available for a full season. Despite that, and this, I'm glad you brought him up. This, to me, tells the whole story of the Saints offense. Despite the fact that they have not had Alvin Kamara at their disposal, he still leads the team in scrimmage yards and scrimmage touchdowns.
Well, he gets the ball a lot.
But it also says a lot about how the playmakers around Derek Carr have not met expectations as a team, is what I'm talking about.
Olave, who has 70-plus catches in each of his first 2 seasons after coming out of Ohio State, only has 4 touchdowns this year. And
well, because Derek's only thrown for 13.
Right.
I mean, that's a low amount of touchdowns.
He had 2 100-yard games, and then this past week was like invisible. And he's got touchdowns.
They didn't need him, in fairness, considering they led Carolina comfortably.
And then he's got 3 touchdown. He's got touchdown catches in 3 of the last 5 games. So in the last month, Olave seems to be becoming more and more of a problem for opposing defenses. Now, I think Adoree Jackson's going to be on him this week. And I think that Adoree, aside from the games he missed with the concussion, he had a few there that he had to sit out. I think Adoree Jackson's played really well this year. Sure. And so, he's not going to back down from that challenge. But Olave is a burner, sub 4.4 speed, really good with his routes, has excellent body control. And, if you've seen some of the catches that he's made this season.
He's a playmaker.
He gets on the highlight reels. So, you could have blanket coverage and still get beat by this guy.
Interestingly, DNP for him each of the last 2 days at practice. So today's report will be something to monitor for Chris Olave.
I did not read anything of concern
Neither
that
did I.
suggested he was not going to play.
But he has not participated.
I'm sure it's probably, those veteran days off.
Correct. I'm sure it has something to do that. And I listen to every single Saints press conference. I do that every week because I think you learn a lot from the opposition. Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael, the OC, even the questions from the media, nothing revolved around that. And I just spoke with Jeff Duncan, who's been covering that team forever for the Times Picking Unit. It'll be part of the latest Giants huddle. He didn't indicate that there was any concern. He said Taysom Hill is absolutely going to play. He said they held them back because they figured they'd beat the Panthers, whether he played or not. And Rashid Shaheed looks promising. No guarantee, but at least looks promising. Olave wasn't even brought up in the conversation. So I'm with you, Paul, but he did not practice each of the last 2 days.
Shaheed's a pretty good return guy, too, we should note, on special teams.
Well, that's why the last thing you want to do, just like the Packers learned the hard way, right? How did the Giants score one of their touchdowns, Paul? An extremely short field because Keyshawn Nixon got greedy, and the Giants made him pay. He should have fell on that football, by the way. I don't understand what he was thinking.
I'm not going to argue with you.
Oh, I wasn't expecting you to argue. I was just bringing it up as a talking point. Okay.
Good forced fumble by Darnay Holmes.
No, great play. But what was he thinking? I didn't. You're bobbling it like a hot potato. Just salvage the possession. And I heard him talk after the game. He didn't even sense Cordell Flott behind him. That's what he said. So Flott made a great play as a result of him trying to make more. But the bottom line is the Giants got a very short field because the other 2 touchdowns were 75 yards. That one wasn't. So the point is, circling back to what you were saying with Shaheed, don't give the Saints favorable field positioning because of Taysom Hill or Shaheed. And remember, the Saints blocked a punt and scored a touchdown against Carolina.
Yeah, and it was interesting. You watch it and you think it's a block punt.
I know.
They later changed it.
They
later changed it to a fumble, but really for all practical purposes, it was a block punt. For all practical purposes. Stats-wise, they called it a fumble. T-Mac, Thomas McGahee, the Giants special teams coordinator, talked about how good their punt rush team is.
He did.
He mentioned that as a concern. Look, the Giants' punt coverage this year, and let me see the updated number. What do I have on the updated number? They're only allowing 5 yards per punt return. which for most of the season has been amongst the top 3 to 5 in the NFL. That's how good this kick coverage has been. Kickoff coverage is not as important because you'd like to think that your kicker can put it through the end zone anytime that he wants, and so there won't be an opportunity to return it. But the punt coverage is a critical part. That's where a lot of lost yards come into play. Giants have been great at that all season long. Nick McLeod, dynamite. Darnay Holmes been really good.
Who McGahee highlighted, too, when he spoke to the media yesterday.
Carter Coughlin and Cam Brown have
been
really good.
Yeah.
So, I think the Giants are well prepared to take care of that part of the game.
I'm just saying it's been a big part of the dialogue over the last few weeks. You could point to field positioning has been huge for the Giants.
Sure.
So there's a game where the Saints, also a struggling offense, they're looking to help out Derek Carr and company as much as possible. You don't want to give them a helping hand. I know it's December, but the giving can happen off the field, not necessarily on the field. All right.
Okay.
A few reminders. Well, I just wanted to make it clear, Paul, okay? You don't have to be that Scrooge character here on the program. I thought you'd maybe label me as Scrooge. I didn't think that I would have to fight back at that.
Not a problem.
Okay, all right.
We're all joyous here after a 3-game winning streak.
Well, with you, it doesn't take much to get you joyous, okay? If they let you in the building, you're joyous, okay? So
that's why I smile every day.
You're not a good example to utilize. Maybe somebody else to make the point. Few reminders before we open up the phone lines here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Giants Huddle Podcast, you can check it out on Giants.com/podcast, as well as your favorite podcast platform. I actually just spoke with Leon Clark, who was Tommy DeVito's QB coach going back to the age 6. So he provided some interesting stories if you want to check that out. They just put that up. Single game tickets are still available as we get down to the final few games of the regular season. You could check that out at Giants.com/tickets to secure your seat. And Giants' official connected TV streaming app is Giants TV. It brings you original video content, game highlights on demand to direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, as well as the Giants mobile app. All right, let's open up the phone lines. We check in with Jackson in Plainview here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. What's happening, Jackson? What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. How's it going?
I'm doing all right. What's on your mind?
Just have a question, what you guys think about the right tackle position. I just saw Evan Neal's doubtful for this week, but assuming he might get back towards Philly or the Rams, Tyree Phillips has held his own, I think, and I think it's a liability putting Evan Neal back in if we beat New Orleans and then we have a must-win against Philly. I think it's a liability to bring Evan Neal back, but also you want to get the young kid some reps, so I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I don't know that there's even a decision to be made until the trainers believe that he can make all of the physical moves necessary without having to deal with the injury troubles. If he can't get over those things and be functional in every physical capacity, he's not going to be in the lineup anyway.
Well, I think the callers...
And that's to be determined right now. We don't know.
Sure. I think to the caller's point, Jackson, you're saying assuming Evan Neal is fully healthy and gets the green light from the trainers.
That's a big assumption. I don't think that he's there yet.
Well, but I'm saying if he gets to that point, let's say whether it's a week,
said the other day,
2 weeks,
if he's healthy and gets to that point, he goes back into the lineup. It's that simple.
I am completely with you.
Even Tyree Phillips?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I mentioned that the other day on the show, and I'm still going to stick to it. If Neal is healthy, you have a responsibility to put him back in there. Tyree Phillips is not Anthony Munoz, okay? I mean, he's not going to the Hall of Fame. Tyree Phillips is a good, solid veteran, good locker room guy. He's done a functional job. He's been part of a unit that's gotten better over the past month. But he's not an all-universe player where you say, oh, my goodness, we can't take Tyree Phillips out. You can't treat Evan Neal based on what Tyree Phillips is. You have to make your decision on Evan Neal based on what the trainers tell you. If they clear him and say he's fully ready to go, he goes. It's really pretty simple.
Jackson, actually, the way that I look at it, and it's an interesting question, my response is very similar to how I approach Tyrod Taylor versus Tommy DeVito. I actually think in this analogy, Tyree Phillips is Tyrod Taylor and Evan Neal is Tommy DeVito, where you want a balance of evaluating the player for years moving forward.
That's true, too.
Okay? You want to give him reps. It's a must. I mean, Evan Neal's missed time each of his last 2 years. The guy's got to play to improve, and to prove to the coaching staff that he's going to be a staple of this offensive line. And you're also balancing, yes, I understand your point about if they beat New Orleans, the mathematics change. They still got a big hill to climb, okay, to secure a playoff spot. Let's at least keep things in perspective. The goal still is to evaluate the individuals and see what's on your roster for next season. So that's why, to me, it's very similar to Tyrod Taylor versus Tommy DeVito. It's, to me, basically identical, at least from my mindset.
That's not a bad comparison, Lance. And to be honest with you, too.
And appreciate the phone call, Jackson.
To further the point, someone asked about this the other day on the show that I was on, and he said, well, what if, like, Neal isn't 100%? He's doing well, but he's not all the way back. And he was asking me, do you think you could make him the jumbo tight end? And I said, well, you know what? If you're going to have him activated and he's not ready for the full load, I would not be in favor of rotating him in Phillips. I don't like that.
Sure.
Okay? Either he's all in as 100%, he goes as the starting right tackle and stays in the game, or he's not capable of getting out there physically and he does not play this week. Then the guy was asking, well, what about that tight end thing? Well, he goes, I don't want to get him some snaps before the Philly game. So here's where I yielded a little bit. I said, okay, if he's feeling pretty close to being good, not quite there, and you want to strictly make him the jumbo tight end on short yardage packages, not replacing Phillips on the field, but making him an extra tight end.
Yeah.
If you want to get his feet wet, if he's like 85, 90% and get his feet wet that way, I'd be okay with it. But I'm not rotating him with Phillips or taking Phillips out unless Neal is fully healthy. I'm not doing it.
I like your game plan. What's the purpose also of putting Evan Neal back at right tackle if he can't operate to at least 100%? Because
None.
Also what I would argue is not only you're hurting the team, but you're hurting your evaluation, Paul.
Of course.
Why are you then going to now say, well, we still don't know what to get out of Evan Neal? Well, you put him out there because he's not 100% healthy. So, of course, he's going to maybe struggle against some of the top-tier pass rushers.
That affects DeVito.
Correct. So I don't think there's any purpose of doing that. But, yeah, if you think that he gives you added depth, an extra big body in short yardage situations, that's fine. He doesn't necessarily have to be put out on an island under those circumstances, Paul. You're asking him to help with the push.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's a completely different story. You're putting him out on an island and you're expecting him to operate as close to or near 100%. No, you've got to make sure the ankle is ready to go.
Yep.
So I don't see them putting him in that situation. Plus, remember, Philadelphia is very different than some of these other opponents that we've been talking about in recent weeks. And they will give you various different looks. And as we talked about, if Dallas beat Philadelphia, which did happen, it completely changes the mindset and the outlook for the Eagles in those last few games because now there's a lot more meaning in those games. They don't have the luxury to sit people and rest people. So, even if you say, we'll put Evan Neal out there because he's going to up against the Eagles' backups, who are not too shabby, by the way, you don't have that luxury anymore under the circumstances. Let's head back to the phone lines. We got Jeff in Maine here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. What's happening, Jeff?
Oh, hey, afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon to you.
I got a question about good. I got a question about Kayvon Thibodeaux, but first, a quick statistical thing. If on the coin toss, it seems in vogue to elect to defer, and I was just wondering if teams have a higher chance of winning statistically.
Yes,
if you knew that.
That's why they do it. Belichick was the first guy to come up with it. He did an analysis and found out that teams deferring the coin toss, and this goes back a few years now. I don't have the recent stats because everyone in the league seems to do it now. It's very rare that a team will accept the ball these days. And it's all based on the fact that when Belichick came out with his analysis, he found that like 52% of the deferred teams wind up winning the game. To which I questioned a head coach one time and said, well, is that enough to really do it? And the answer was, well, it's 2% more than 50. Isn't that enough of a reason? It gives you an edge. I kind of laughed it off because in my mind, I think it's preposterous. I think this automatic deferral of the opening kickoff is so wrong. It is so analytics-based. It makes no sense to me. I think every game should be taken on its own merit. You need to determine the mentality of your team, the health of your units, the weather in the stadium that day. There are intangibles that would impact my decision if I won the coin toss. And I think those need to be decided on a game-by-game basis. I am totally against the automatic deferral.
Well, the Packers, they took the ball in the last game.
They did.
So that was refreshing. Now, obviously,
of course, they'll tell you they lost, so now they'll blame it on the coin toss.
But I see your point. This is what I will say. I don't know necessarily if it's that it leads to an automatic win. I think the mindset is, too, the chances of double dipping, where if you have a late possession and you're able to put points on the board and then you know you're also going to get the ball to start the third quarter, that's attractive, where you put pressure on the opposition.
That's why Belichick came up with the thought and then did the analysis and said, this is pretty good. And, of course, it's a copycat league. So when Belichick, basically, put his stamp of approval on it, every other coach in the league decided, we got to do it too.
Here's just a statistic. This is an article from, I don't even know who to credit this article to. But it did say that prior to 2008, teams would elect to receive 99% of the time in the National Football League.
Yeah.
More than a decade later now, all of a sudden, it's gone the complete opposite way. Isn't that crazy? Now you would say 99% of them defer, but in 2008, we're not going back that far in time. That says a lot.
Yeah. So that's your answer, Jeff. And again, what you must understand is that too many coaches in this league want an alibi, okay? They will rely on the analytics because numbers are black and white. And if things don't work out the way they want them to, they can always defend themselves by saying, look what the numbers said. The numbers said that I had to go this way. That's what it is. Analytics and those trends are nothing but alibis for coaches who wind up on the failing side of the stick. Okay? Instead of doing what they should do and analyze for their own mind about what makes sense, what are the intangibles, how should we play this, because it's a lot tougher to defend your gut and your reasoning than it is to defend a black and white piece of paper that says the numbers say we needed to do this. You get it?
Yeah, no, you have to think for yourself, and I agree. It's interesting. I did have a question about Kayvon Thibodeaux, who I'm liking a lot.
Sure.
If he keeps progressing like he did, that's kind of like what Dex did. And so I get that Kayvon isn't Lawrence Taylor. To me, Lawrence Taylor was like the
There's
Michael
only
Jordan
one.
of football.
There's only one. There will never be another Lawrence Taylor.
Exactly. But how would you compare Kayvon to LT, like stylistically? And I'll take my answer off here.
All right,
Not
Jeff,
at all.
Appreciate the phone call.
Totally different players.
I don't think they're similar in many departments at all. Yeah.
Totally different.
Yeah, Kayvon is not as a back-breaking, disruptive player as Lawrence Taylor is.
He doesn't have the range Taylor had. He doesn't have the power that Taylor had. He clearly doesn't have even... Taylor's had superhuman quickness off the edge. Now Thibodeaux has good get-off speed, okay? But in terms of being able to track guys down sideline to sideline, how many times did we see Taylor go from the right side all the way to the left sideline and make a tackle? I mean, no. Please don't. I'm a big Kayvon Thibodeaux guy. I was desperately asking the Giants to draft him. He was one of my targets. They got him. This is exactly what I thought he would do. He's lived up to my expectations. I'm pleased with him, but please don't compare him to Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor was an absolute freak of nature in every way. That's why he changed the game.
I think if there's any current player, and I'm not saying he's the equivalent, but I think Micah Parsons has characteristics that are in the ballpark of LT more so than Kayvon Thibodeaux. In terms of the style of his play, Paul. I'm not expecting you to come and meet me halfway. So don't. It's okay. I didn't say it for me to get a nod out of you. I'm just telling you my opinion is I do see Micah having a skill set that resembles some of the characteristics of LT if
I
you're
would-
going to go with a current player.
I would say one thing to make something simple for some of you young folks who may not have seen Lawrence Taylor play live and in person. I'm sure you've seen the NFL films of the interception return against Detroit on Thanksgiving Day. How many linebackers in today's game do you think could make that play? Not only grab the pick, but on a bad hamstring. Should I repeat that? A bad hamstring. Go the distance and create separation while he was doing it. That's how special Lawrence Taylor was.
Well, LT was an athlete. To even label him as a linebacker may not do it justice, right?
I'm with you.
Guy was an athlete.
Love it.
Well, I'm a big LT fan. I respect his game, Paul. You don't have to convince me.
Greatest defensive
You're not
player
sitting
who
next
ever
to the
walked
enemy
field.
here. I can promise you that.
Good.
Can't even compare his style to anyone
No,
else.
I know, right, Pearson?
No,
That's
you
all I
can't.
wanted to do. I simply was comparing the style of a current player. Can't go there.
There isn't. There isn't. The closest two players who could even come within the shoreline of the continent of Lawrence Taylor were Ricky Jackson from the Saints.
Okay.
You'll remember him.
Yes.
And Andre Tippett from the Patriots when he was in his prime.
But, I mean, those guys, there's been some time since they played.
But
I'm asking
those-
you to move a little bit
There's nobody
forward.
today.
Paul,
There's nobody today. No, there's not.
I think you could find two characteristics
They were
or so
talking
from a
about,
current
the
player.
media was talking about Khalil Mack being like LT to Belichick just a couple of years ago. And he goes, no, you're talking about LT. No, don't go there. I feel the same way.
Well, Parsons, though, has come up in dialogue over the last few years. You remember when the Cowboys played the Giants last year, there were articles written about it.
Well,
So-
probably by people who didn't see LT play.
Well, I think whether you saw him play or not, I do see the athleticism. All I'm saying is with Parsons and the ability and range to defend all parts of the field. He's not LT. He's got a long way to go. I mean, LT, he did it year in and year out for a decade, okay? Parsons hasn't done that yet. But what I'm saying is I do see
with
some
numerous
characteristics. That's all.
injuries, too.
Sure. Without a doubt. Well, hey, the game has changed also in terms of guys going out there
Yes, it has.
not fully healthy. So I think we can at least admit that. All right, let's head back to the phone lines here. Let's check in with Chris in North Carolina. Chris, what's happening? What do you got for us?
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Doing all right. What's on your mind?
So listen, hey, Paul Dottino,
Yeah.
and Lance Medow.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes.
listen, I want to make a point. So my point is, I understand that Tommy DeVito is an undrafted quarterback for the Giants, and he has a lot to learn about the field and all that kind of thing. But I got to say this. I don't think I've seen a quarterback on the Giants make a pass either back shoulder or slant or leading the receiver down the field as well as he has since Eli Manning.
Well, it's a small sample size,
Yeah, I
but
mean-
he's made some really good throws.
I mean, Tyrod Taylor's made some nice throws throughout the course of his career and even limited time with the Giants. I mean, that's a bit hyperbole, Chris, in fairness.
Well, Chris, I'll actually go more factual here. Since Eli Manning has retired, the Giants don't have the back shoulder throw as a big part of their playbook. It's just not. So that's why you don't see it very much. Even Eli's last year or two, they kind of took that out of the playbook because the coaching staff didn't believe in it. I happen to have it as one of my favorite plays. But
I love that back shoulder.
it's a great play. It's practically
I saw him throw that to Barkley in the Washington game. That was a back shoulder touchdown he threw.
It's practically
wheel route, yeah.
It's it's practically unstoppable for a first down. But there are some coaching staffs who believe that the back shoulder throw limits your yardage after catch. And the reason is because to make the back shoulder throw, you have to be able to stop your momentum and catch the ball in front of the defender, which not only hurts your ability to then take off and accelerate a second time, it allows the defender to recover and make the tackle. So there are some coaches who will I don't want to give that up. I'd rather try to hit my guy on the move and try to get him open so that he has a free path to yak yardage. That's the philosophy against it. The philosophy for it is it's practically an automatic first down anytime you want it.
Well, but if you're going into the end zone, you don't have to worry about yak. So those throws are fine. You're talking about it when you're in the middle of the field.
In the field
you don't
of
want to
play.
limit the potential after the
field
catch.
of play.
I get that.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. All right, Chris. Appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring there. Let's go to Big Ed in Maryland joining us here on BBKO. What's happening, Big Ed?
What's up, man? I got Big Lance and Big Paul Lee D is back.
It's a long time, man. How you doing?
I've been okay, man. I talked to John and Lance was the other day, right?
It seemed like the other day. Yes, I was going to say. I don't know. Are you violating our rules here, Pearson? Are you sure you've been tallying? I don't know. I think he snuck in here a second time this week. All right, Big Ed.
What do you got?
Hey, guys, I just hope we can just go to New Orleans, figure out a way to contain them, and score. So I feel like the key to our game is defense scoring points. If they can get turnovers and score points continuously like they've been, we got every chance of winning that game. That game and the Rams game are the most serious games. I'm not excluding the Philly games. We already know they're important. We're looking outside of those two because getting the Saints, Paulie, you got to back me up. You got to let me know. But winning the Saints game and winning the Rams game is major, right?
Well, that gets you to 8 wins, okay? And we've been discussing this now for a couple of weeks. It's possible that an 8-win team could sneak in as the third wild card. Of course, there are a lot of tiebreakers that would be involved. The Giants, to do that, would have to beat 2 of the teams in front of them, the Saints and the Rams. They've already taken care of the Packers. However, they did lose earlier this season to Seattle, which is another team in that quicksand right now. But yes, if you still want to hold on to the playoff dream, and I'm on a week-to-week basis, Big Ed, I'm not going any further than this. I as looking at this game, if I'm the Giants, I got to have this game, and that's all I'm thinking about. But if you want to dream about playoff possibilities, you have to win at least 8. 7's not getting you in. 8 may not get you in either.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you got to win out.
But you got to get at least 8.
Shot.
You got to get at least 8. So to your point, yes. You know, if you're going to consider yourself a heavy underdog against Philly twice, you must, okay, beat the Saints, beat the Rams, and then somehow upset Philly in one of those 2 games.
Right, exactly. Because, see, that's the key. It's like so simple.
Yeah. It's real simple.
Sure, absolutely.
It's real simple.
Wait, what I don't understand is, Big Ed, when we spoke to... No, hold on, Big Ed, hold on a minute, okay? I got to put you on the spot here. When you called us the other day, you said the Giants were going to win out, no ands, no ifs, no buts. I mean, you had the parade ready, you had the floats, you had the confetti. Now, all of a sudden, 48 hours later, you hope they beat the Saints. What happened? Did you not eat your Cheerios this morning? I don't know what's going on in your neck of the woods.
I did not eat the cereal. I didn't eat the cereal yet, my buddy Lance.
Apparently.
My brother Lance.
Yeah.
Look, so I'm not tripping. I'm still there.
It doesn't sound like it.
No,
I don't sense it.
What it is, I'm being realistic. Paulie makes me be realistic.
Wait a minute. I don't make you realistic enough when I spoke to you with John a few days ago and told you to pipe down a little bit. You needed Paul, of all people, to pipe you down. This is unreal what we're hearing on
Big Ed, listen.
I'm beside myself.
This is what I'm telling my closest of friends and family members who really, really pull for this team each and every week. I've said to them, get this win against New Orleans, and Christmas is going to be a happy event. Okay?
Yep.
Because
I agree.
The team will still be alive going into that Philadelphia game. Now, whatever happens down at the link is going to happen. But at least you know that going into Christmas, you can wrap all your presents with a smile on your face.
With that win, that would be big because they already know then, they're really going to do it. Now we're going to be showing like Super Bowl 25 run. We got that same 15.
Oh, now he's reaching again, Lance.
I tell you?
He's reaching again.
Wait, I thought Paul was supposed to keep you in check, and now you went off the deep end again, Big Ed. I mean, we need a psychologist to get through and navigate this phone.
One game at a time, Big Ed.
All right, Big Ed.
Let him get
we'll
this
let
one.
you go on that note. Yeah.
That's what we got.
Is there something
one
about
game
this?
at a time, but every game is an important game all the way to the end.
All right. Is there
Once
something,
you get to the end,
Big Ed?
it.
Hold on.
Good luck trying to squeeze that
I
in.
want to try to give. Did we lose him already?
No, we didn't lose
Okay.
him. I
Is
still,
there
yeah.
one
I'm
thing
still here.
about this Saints game that you wanted to ask or make a point about? We should give you that chance.
Man, just simple. Just run the ball.
Well, we
You know what's
discussed
up,
that.
Paulie. We got to run that ball, man.
We discussed that.
'Cause
And it's got to be a combo of Barkley
I got one
and
more point.
DeVito.
Wait.
Go
Hold
ahead.
up, y'all. I want to get to that. And Paulie got to invite Vito over to the house, man, for the Cutlets. But more importantly, right, I love what Vito just did, man, in this last game. He waited patiently to not get sacked. He paid attention to what he needed to do, and it's helping. And we're winning because of it. It's awesome. And then get Wheeler back. Oh!
All right, Big Ed.
Big
Be
Ed.
good.
Appreciate the
now
phone
he can
call.
go.
Yeah.
Uh,
now he could go.
No,
as opposed to
because-
5 minutes earlier.
Well,
yes.
he's bringing up a valid point about the run game. It had been explained to us by both Dable and Kafka that last week going into the Packers game, they stressed to Tommy DeVito about running with the ball, avoiding trouble, avoiding getting hit, and don't be afraid to scramble. They stressed that to him, and obviously he listened because we saw how quickly he made decisions to pull the ball down and either run to throw or run to run. It was a dramatic difference from the first 3 games that he played.
Well, look at how many negative plays the Giants had against Green Bay. You want to know why they won the game? I mean, we could sit here and talk about what Tommy did and what Wan'Dale Robinson did. I'm telling you, they won that game because they limited and did damage control on the volume of negative plays. That's how they won that game. So that has to be duplicated again Sunday against New Orleans. Do you know the longest third down play they faced was a 3rd and 11, Paul? And 3rd and 11 is not ultimately attractive, but for the Giants, 3rd and 11, you will gladly take that to the bank. Because for how this season has gone, and if you look at the run plays, just avoiding a -3 run as much as they've had over the course of the season.
They had a few zeros, a few minus
But you know what?
ones,
You'll take those.
But
you'll take the zeros
nothing
and the negative ones.
disastrous.
That was why they won the game. So
it was a big deal, very big deal.
that's what has to happen again against New Orleans. And Tommy DeVito's running helped avoid those negative plays because when you tell the opposition you're not going to get 2 to 3 sacks and you're not going to force us to lose, let's say, on those 3 sacks, 15, 16 yards, right? 5, 6 yards every single sack. That adds up over the course of a drive because now you go from facing a 2nd and 16 to now facing, if Tommy gives you 7 yards on a run, it's 2nd and 3. So, I know I'm doing math here from a hypothetical standpoint, but manageable downs and distances.
Well,
that was the difference maker.
Lance, the other thing about that is secondary, and that is not only do you create a much more favorable situation for the defense from those negative plays, but you're also costing yourself field position.
Yeah, and it adds up. It's cumulative over the course of the
game. It's very painful.
Yeah.
And, I kept saying that Tommy DeVito, one of his best qualities in his first few games here is that he didn't make bad plays worse. Better to take a sack than fumble it or throw an interception.
Yeah.
Okay? The sack was the lesser of the 3 evils. Well, guess what? This past weekend, he erased the 3rd evil. Didn't take the sack either.
He turned it into a positive.
Which is absolutely phenomenal. Now, again, it looks like he learned how to do that within 1 week's time. God bless. I mean, I don't know if you can expect him to be that clean again a 2nd week in a row after the first month of the season when he was playing. His resume was littered with holding the ball too long and taking too many sacks. In 1 week, it seems like he just miraculously cleaned all that up. For the Giants' sake, I hope he is at least close to that level of efficiency this week. If he is, they certainly have a better chance to win. If he cleans it up entirely and prevents sacks and turnovers altogether, 0 sacks, zero turnovers, they got a really good chance to win.
Oh, that's why they're putting together this winning streak, because look at the turnover differential. Your defense and your special teams are taking away the ball at a high rate, and you're not giving it back. So
12
that's
takeaways in the 3-game winning streak.
Yeah. Well, they've had multiple takeaways in every game going back to Week 10 at Dallas. They have had at least a minimum of 2, and then they had none against the Cowboys. Excuse me, they had none against the Raiders, which was the game prior, and then they had 2 against the Jets. So when you add it up, you're talking about 5 of the last 6 games. They've had multiple takeaways. It's been steady. It's been consistent. And on the offensive side, in terms of giving the ball back, they've had, let's see, during that span, I'll go back to the Jets game. The Jets and the Commanders, they had no turnovers. They had 2 against the Raiders, 1 against Dallas, 1 against the Patriots, and 2 against the Packers, though 1, remember, was on special teams when it went off of Bobby McCain. But even if you add all of that up, okay, so you're talking about 6 turnovers versus you add up 12 in the last 3 games, but I'm going to add on now 4 more from those 2 other games, okay? That's 16 versus 6. That's plus 10, Paul, going back to Week 8 against the Jets. It's no coincidence that has simultaneously run parallel to these wins. You brought up an interesting point, and I want to hit on this before we wrap up. I think now all of a sudden the mindset of the opposition does change, Paul, because I think if you're the Saints, not to say that the Packers were not respecting Tommy DeVito's legs, but I don't think they went into that game saying Tommy's going to run 10 times for 71 yards.
Well, a big deal is that Quay Walker, their
leading
tackler and their most athletic linebacker, was not available for the game. Walker could have applied extra pressure, could have done some sideline-to-sideline defensive maneuvers that would have limited DeVito's scrambling ability.
Sure.
The Packers did not have a lot of speed at their linebacker spot, or for that matter in their secondary, and it showed, because once the Giants were able, whether it was DeVito or Barkley, able to get to that second line of defense, there was yardage to be gained.
So you've got Demario Davis in the middle. You got Pete Werner, who is another young linebacker, and then Zach Baun. So those are the 3 guys that the Giants will see. And Baun is an athletic guy from the Big Ten. I'd be interested to see how they utilize him. But I can tell you this. I was listening to the players and the coaches. Demario Davis, the first thing he was asked about was Tommy DeVito's strong play. And he pointed out, he said, because he was asked about how much the Giants' offense has changed. And he said, listen, whether it's Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor, Tommy DeVito, the common element, all 3 guys have mobility. Yeah. All 3 guys can operate out of the pocket. So the Saints are well aware, and I'm sure, if anything, it's magnified when they turn on the Packers film and they see what Tommy DeVito was able to do. That's not to say that Tommy's not going to have success, but something tells me Joe Woods, Dennis Allen, and that defense, they're going to be prepared for DeVito thinking, okay, I got to take off and not give the defensive front an opportunity to bring me down.
Well, in effect, the Giants unveiled the secret weapon against Green Bay, and that is Tommy DeVito's legs, which he hadn't used nearly as much in his earlier games.
Yeah.
Well, the curtain has now been drawn, and everybody can see, hey, Tommy DeVito can throw on the run, and Tommy DeVito can take off with the ball. That alerts everybody who has seen the tape that they need to prepare for that style of attack. You'd be a fool to think that the Saints are not going to be better prepared than Green Bay was.
That's another thing that you got me thinking about. This was why we were having the conversation about the pros and cons of playing Tyrod Taylor versus Tommy DeVito. The sample size is so small for Tommy still, right? It's minute.
Sure.
You want to continue to see how teams adjust to what he shows.
And how he adjusts
and how
to
he
them.
reacts. Bingo. That's it. That's why these starts and these performances are so critical. Because you want to see the game of chess. It's not just what Tommy's doing. It's how the defense sees what he did the previous week, throws something new at him, and then you see whether or not Tommy could throw a counterpunch. That's the critical aspect here in play down the stretch.
The one thing that I am happy about is that Tommy did show us after the Giants got throttled in Dallas. Remember, in his first start, he showed us that he would not be affected negatively by failure. Now, again, they've played lesser opponents. And there have been
Which is important.
And
yeah.
there have been some favorable aspects of those matchups. And the Giants have taken advantage of those things. My point is, and I said this the other day, folks, again, if it's a repeat, I apologize, but I don't think Lance has heard it from me. Tommy DeVito has Jersey grit about him. He does not get intimidated by anything on the field. He does not look overwhelmed by anything on the field. He's got that Jersey mentality that says, hey, you know what? This is what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to do it. And, no sense in worrying about failure because that's not in my makeup. That's what Tommy DeVito has shown me in the month that he has played. And there are many players, quarterbacks in particular, who allow those mind games of intimidation and of an overwhelming spotlight to impact them to where they then make the physical error on the field. Tommy DeVito has a leg up on those guys because he's not falling victim to those two psychological things that inherently come with the pressure of playing starting quarterback in New York City.
I think he has the mindset. He's really got nothing to lose at this point, right? I mean, where he was on the depth chart, take advantage of your opportunity, prove that you have value on this roster moving forward. So I think that's part of the dialogue. One thing, though, I will add is if you do grow up and are willing to come through the tunnel and the bridge, you'll see that there are New Yorkers that adopt that mentality as well. I know that may be very difficult for you to wrap your head around, but I just wanted to throw that out.
I
Yes.
will add this about one more thing about Tommy.
Oh, see, he just completely, Pearson, notice, he just wiggled around that statement without any comeback.
Tommy's a
no
Jersey
return.
guy.
I understand, but it just seemed like you were dismissing the fact that
I'm
there
not
are other
dismissing.
people outside of Jersey
We
that
know
seem
New
to
York
have that
toughness.
mentality.
Pat Riley's Knicks, the New York Rangers, the Broadway Blues, the Bronx Bombers. We know New York toughness.
I'm talking about individuals that actually were born and bred in New York. You went the sports route, but please go ahead.
All right.
We're all
Anyway.
itching to hear this last comment.
No.
Yes.
My
Yes.
final point about
Yes.
Tommy DeVito is this. I think that the Giants coaching staff, to take him from where he was when he walked onto the field at rookie minicamp, we can credit Kafka, Dable, and Shea Tierney, the quarterback's coach. All three of those guys for helping to bring him along to where at this early stage of his career, he's not just been functional, he's been helping the team win games. That is to their credit. They deserve a hell of a lot more than just thank you. They have really done yeoman's work with him. And to Tommy's credit, as somebody mentioned to me the other day, and it's somebody who knows Tommy well and knows the coaching staff well, Tommy was very willing to listen.
And you need that.
Not every young player is willing to be coached up.
Yeah, especially if they believe that they were wronged in terms of the position that they were put in on the roster and deserved a shot. But you know what? I think him losing his job at Syracuse grounded him a bit and gave him better perspective. That's just my opinion. And I think when you are put in a position where something was taken away, it at least prepares you to handle it like he's done here on the NFL level. All right. That is going to wrap up Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Today's episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live, part of the Giants platforms everywhere, and Giants.com/podcast. We'll be up and running again on Monday, same time at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Enjoy the weekend in the game. We'll speak to you next week right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Have a good one.